Hello and welcome to ETCFO.com by the Economic Times. Today we have a special series on the union budget called Decoding the Budget, and I have CFOs, the industry experts, and the economists with us to decode the union budget for you and me. So let me welcome the speakers that I have for this particular show. My first speaker is Miss Yuvika Singhal, economist, Quantico Research. Yuvika, glad to have you.
Pleasure.
My next speaker is Mr. Robin Banerjee, seasoned finance expert and chairman of Nucleon Research. Robinji, glad to have you.
Hello, hi, good evening to you.
And friends, we also are going to have Gurvinder Singh, the CFO of Mitsubishi Electric, and we'll also have Sanjeev Jha, CFO of Purcell Kelly India HR Solutions, very soon joining us. I think there are some network issues, but they will be part of this session very, very soon. But Robin and Yuvika, really glad to see you, and really excited to learn from you in terms of how do you see the budget. So I have specific questions, but let me begin by asking you your takeaway or your learnings and your pickup points from the budget. And Yuvika, ladies first, or the economists first. I will come to you first. What did you learn from the budget? 4.9% fiscal deficit estimation or a target projection, which I think everyone is quite happy with. But what are your pickup points, Yuvika, specifically from the budget?
Right. Thank you for having me, Amol. I think it's broadly a budget which I could call a good budget, which ticks off the hallmarks of offering stability, continuity, and at the same time addressing some of the economic issues that were prevalent in the run up to the budget that were being discussed with high decibel sound. So the government did, in its budget proposal, have a very sharp laser focus on job creation. And it was not just job, but formal jobs where the government has, specifically been, allocating more money. And this is through either the EPFO route or through, more formal internship programs in the formal job sector. And this is, mind you, for first time job entrants. And this is the category that is the 18 to 25-year-olds, where we see the maximum or the highest rate of unemployment when we go back and look at unemployment data divided by age groups. So this definitely ticks one of the issues that the economy was facing and needed redressal from the government. I think the other key takeaway is that the capex thrust of the budget remains in place. So while we did not see any uptick or a top up to the capital expenditure outlay, which was rightly so, because we have only 8 months of implementation timeline going forward, and it would have been very difficult to pull forward a very high or a lofty capital expenditure target. But if you look at as a percentage of GDP, capex is still at a two-decadal high at about 3.4% of GDP. So the capex thrust remains. And what is essential? So from a consumption perspective, again, there was a lot of chatter. While the government did offer some SOPs for the taxable tax relief for the income and the salaried, but I think what they have also done is that they have continued to invest in the economy by focusing on investments and creation of infrastructure. And mind you, while its lag or spillovers to consumption might come with a lag, but it's a more appropriate way of hand-holding consumption. Had they gone a populist way of putting out direct income benefits or some kind of windfall gains in the disposable income, it could have been inflationary in nature. But doing a roundabout way of focusing on investment, thereby creation of jobs and income, they do support consumption in the economy, which also needed some hand-holding at the current stage. So I think the budget in its sense, like I said, provides continuity, but at the same time, they have been able to address some of the issues that we were talking ahead of the budget.
Noted your points, Yuvika. I think very detailed one, and I think all the economists are happy because the government has kind of curtailed the freebies or the remedies as such and focused on the capital and the rational spending. I think government has maybe advised an astrologer or a numerologist and looked at the 11, 11, 11 number of the infrastructure spending. Noted your points, Yuvika. Robinji, let me come to you and learn from you your pickup points specifically from the budget. Robinji, unmute yourself, please.
I feel the budget has three themes. As whatever the government is saying, my three themes are agriculture,
Hmm.
skilling, and MSMEs. These are the three themes which the government has picked up in this budget. Obviously, they have missed some, but let's only focus on for the time being, based on your question, what is it that they have done holistically for the budget. Of course, the the underlying objective is employment, and the current Lok Sabha election results does show that there were two issues which the government or the ruling party was uh, suffering from. One is employment or unemployment, as the case as you call, and inflation. So they tried to attack the unemployment and inflation through three strategic issues: agriculture, skilling, and encouraging and focusing on MSMEs. This is how I see. In agriculture, quick words, they are focusing on R&D, new type of research, new type of seeds, new types of agriculture, and get away from water guzzling products like wheat and sugarcane. In skilling, in the economic survey, the government said by 2030, India needs 80 lakh new jobs. That means in the next 6 years, the country needs 80 lakhs new jobs. I think it is understated. They need another 30, 40 lakhs more, but let's keep it aside and focus on 80 lakhs. And assuming that is correct, the government focused on how to skill um, people, youngsters, so that these jobs can be created. And in MSMEs, they all know that 60% of the manufacturing comes from 60% of people employed comes from MSMEs, providing about 20% of GDP, manufactured GDP. And that's where they are focusing on MSMEs. What is it that MSMEs thrust? MSMEs, the thrust is giving them financing. And for that financing, the government will give guarantees. This is the
Right.
big picture. So coming back, they're focused on unemployment, they're focused on inflation by encouraging agriculture, skilling, and MSMEs. This is my key takeaway.
Sure, agriculture and MSME has been a great focus this time. Noted your points, Robinji. Friends and the readers and the viewers, we are still trying to check with the two speakers. They're trying their best to join, but I think it's raining heavily and the network, perhaps the god of network, is not in support. Sanjivji, can you hear us?
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me? Sorry
Yes,
about
yes, thank you.
delay.
Yes. No, I copied you. I think there is a lot of network issue, but great to see you, Sanjeev. We have Robin and Yuvika with us. They already shared their pickup points from the budget. Sanjeev, I want you to share your pickup points to begin with from the budget.
Yeah, I think I being in the people's company, I think I saw a lot of mention and focus about the employment, skilling, lot of incentive being announced to enhance employment in manufacturing in all formal sectors. I
Right.
think that is the focus, the upgradation of the ITIs. I think there's a lot of focus on the whole manpower thing and how do we skill them and how we make them employable. And because that is one story which is somewhat not so great so far. And with a growing economy and we kind of replacing very soon Japan in the GDP list, I think this is one area where I think government has now kind of understood it that it is utmost important to address it. So I think that's the most important piece. Second, I think there is a lot of focus on the agricultural and the farmers side of it. I think which has always been the case, but I think this time they are kind of seem very committed. And thirdly, I think there is a reform story which they want to now take it to the next stage,
Right.
and whether it is related to the income tax or whether it is related to the ease of doing business, I think that focus is still moving around, bringing some of the initiatives like Vivad Se Vishwas schemes, some of these. I think it's quite a lot of things they are kind of highlighting. Not everything could be covered in 1.5 hour speech of finance minister, but I think there is a lot behind it, and I think it's really good to see that they're really trying to address a lot of things, and also startup. They're trying to make a investment friendly country. The two aspect: one where they've given angel taxes completely now abolished, and secondly they've reduced the rate of the foreign company, the corporate tax rate. So there is also a lot of focus, overall focus of inclusive as well as external, and looks like, I think we're going to see a benefit of it as we move forward. Yeah.
No, certainly, Sanjeev, I copied you. I thought you will speak in a high speech, in fact, because like 20% budget is specifically for your segment. But good to learn from you. I will come with some specific questions to you very, very soon.
Sure.
But Gurvinderji, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, sir. I can hear all of you. No issues.
Great. Thank you so much, Gurvinderji. I want you to tell us your pickup points. What did you like the most from the budget today?
Okay. So let me start with the budget. So I would like to start, that this budget is basically moving from, earlier we used to have roti, kapda or makan. Okay. Now we are moving towards nokri, sadak or makan. Okay. Why I'm saying that? Because nokri, the government have addressed this issue, which has been there for last, so many years, and they have brought, I would say, innovative schemes. 3 schemes they have brought out for employment generation, which is linked to incentives. Basically, they are trying to address the formalization of sector, formalization of labor force. So people coming from contract labor regime to more formalization, which will help in creating basically more jobs. That is one, and this will going to address. I think this will add about 5 million more jobs to the economy, and that is one. And secondly, for a Makan, they are doing a lot of things for urban development, and they have kept about 10 lakh crores for Prime Minister Awas Yojana. I think this will going to address and benefit almost 1 crore urban people, urban poor and middle people. So this will help in which will give a great boost to the economy. So that is second. And thirdly, as I mentioned, sadak. So the government focus has been for the last so many years on on creating infrastructure. So now they are allocating about 11 lakhs crore for this infrastructure, which is about 3.4% of GDP. So this will definitely create a lot of which will create a great boost to the economy in terms of into various sectors, to the various industry sectors, maybe steel, maybe cement, and all other allied sectors. And lastly, the government is also bringing a lot of things in the tourism also. Like, for example, they are trying to have a east sector for the tourism by creating, by redeveloping a lot of iconic Bihar temples. Then also creating a Nalanda as a tourist university and Nalanda as a tourist center, and reviving Nalanda University, and also creating Kashi type model for both Gaya and Gaya temple. So that is also give a great boost to the Indian economy, and bring a lot of foreign exchange also for that. So, and perhaps I would like to say that I think the government have touched each and every sector, and by giving 9 priorities, maybe like productivity and resilience in agriculture. So in agriculture also, they have allocated about 1.52 lakhs crore for agriculture research and increasing the productivity, probably. So this will also going to, I think, benefit about 1 crore farmers across country and India. And lastly, on the energy sector also, they are also trying to set up, give more boost to the nuclear energy, creating energy through the nuclear technologies by setting up Bharat small reactors, and also increasing R&D in Bharat small modular reactors. So I think that is my take on this budget. So it's a very growth oriented, very inclusive budget, I would say. Thank you.
Oh, sure. I liked your analogy, roti kapda or makan wala. Gurvinder ji, thank you so much. Yuvika, let me come back to you now. And, my question is specifically on the economy side. Obviously, agriculture is always there is a spend, infrastructure has been always a robust or an integral part of this government's budget in last couple of budgets that we have seen. Employment skills have been a new area that they have added, but the broad issues when you look at the corporate India and the economy as such is deepening the bond market, improving the rating of India in terms of the sovereign India's rating, reducing the debt to GDP and debt as such completely, and more importantly, giving purchase power into the hands of the middle class or the large people. Do you think these 4 to 5 sectors, these 4 to 5 topics which I just mentioned, have been covered in this budget to a large extent?
So I think when we look at these subjects, which are somewhat longer term, so when we talk about consumption, you cannot spur consumption in a span of a quarter or two. When you talk about bond market, adding more liquidity to it, that also needs to be given some time. And most of these issues are slightly more medium term in their nature. So I think the government's approach towards most of these issues should be seen in conjunction with the budget and not just the budget standalone. So while some of these issues the government did touch upon in the budget, but I think most of these issues have been on government's radar in the past few years. So consumption is one sector where they have acknowledged that it needs hand holding. Like I said, some kind of SOPs have already been announced on the tax front. Also, the continued investment thrust of the government also has spillover effects from for consumption. So that is one thing. As far as bond market is concerned, I think India has embarked on the journey of its inclusion of bond indices in the global of its bonds in the global bond indices. So we saw the onset of India's bond inclusion in the JP Morgan, and probably this is the first step that India is making forays into the global bond indices. But what it also means is that there will perhaps be greater scrutiny of foreign investors on India's not just macros but also fiscal metrics. And here I think the government has displayed excellent prudence over the last few years. So while our fiscal deficit target did zoom in the after the outbreak of the pandemic, but systematically over the last 3 or 4 years, they have brought it down and now envisaging to bring it down below 5% in FY25, and they have a soft target of 4.5% in FY26. And in the last part of the budget speech, the FM did allude that they will continue to remain committed to bringing down the fiscal deficit in order to have debt dynamics which are stable in the country. So I think most of these issues did find some touching upon in the budget speech, but the government has been extremely nimble-footed and active on most of these issues, and we need to see it as a conjunction of measures and reforms that the government has announced in the last few years.
Certainly.
Any specific topic that I missed? I touched upon consumption that you mentioned, bond market, debt levels.
Yes.
Any other?
Purchasing power, if you could add that.
So I think purchasing power is a more a more tricky subject, largely because while we have seen India grow at 8% plus in FY24, the I think the concern remains that a large part of this growth has been very uneven in nature. So while the top income earners still have a very strong purchasing power, which is reflected in high demand for premium products, whether it's premium cars or housing. But if you look at the middle income segment of the population, their incomes have largely stagnated, and those at the very fag end of the income pyramid have actually seen a decline of incomes. Also, to remember that inflation in the economy has been above RBI's midpoint, that is 4%, and within which food prices have been higher. So the burden of inflation is also felt highest by the lower income segment and the middle class. So purchasing power is something that the government would want to correct, but it's easier said than done. The approach of the government in this budget has to be is that they're trying to make growth, whether it's a 7% or an 8%, something more inclusive by focusing on jobs, by focusing on agri, by focusing on women, girl, education, skilling. So what they are trying to do is to make that 7 or 8% growth appear more or turn more inclusive, so as to bring everybody into the benefit of a high growing economy.
Certainly, Yuvika. Robinji, let me come to you. You alluded a couple of points in your pickup points only from the budget. But in the last couple of years, though India Inc.'s or corporate India's balance sheet looks really clean and neat, it's also because of them not going for higher capex, very strongly. Looking at this budget, which has made a continuity, the government has come into the power. Do you think now the India Inc., the large corporates, will go ahead and maybe perhaps focus on capex? Do you think the corporate India will, look at this budget as more positive and in more positive and optimistic manner and perhaps spend heavily now? Uh, so please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Capex is the most potent medicine which any economy can have in order to make it grow. Government already is deciding to spend 11,11,111 crores. Of course, as you rightly mentioned, it is a numerological number. Irrespective what the truth is, government is going to spend about 11 lakh. The effective money which they are going to spend will be around 15 lakh crore, which is mentioned in the budget itself. Now the question is, what about private sector? One most important is the capex. For every 100 rupees of capex, the economy gains about 400 to 500. It has 4 to 5 times the benefit factor. Now, what happens to private sector? It is no doubt the private sector investments had come down significantly, and more so during the COVID time, which almost vanished. Then slowly from 21, 22, it has started enhancing. In fact, the last year, the capex of private sector has been higher. This has been covered by the economic survey also. What is also good that the private sector quality of balance sheet is now improving. And if the balance sheet power increases, their ability to borrow and garner equity also enhances. There is nobody, no private sector on earth who does not want to grow. And the growth necessarily means investment, and one of the investment areas is capex. So I personally feel with now certainty of what is going to happen in the central government, because there were some uncertainties that this last government was coming to an end, and therefore they wanted to see what happens to the third term. And of course, now with the budget which has now come out today, to my mind, the private sector investments, I think you will now see a huge growth, especially because the profitability has enhanced. The ability for them to garner or to access capital market has also significantly enhanced, because stock market is booming, not only in India, all over the world. And with the much more cleaned balance sheet of the banks, especially the public sector banks, their ability to give loans and debts have also enhanced. So you would soon see the private sector capex growing in tandem, almost in tandem with that of the government, if not better.
So that was really meaningful, Robin sir. Let me come to you, Sanjeev ji. And my question to you, Sanjeev ji, is the government has spoken a lot about employment and reskilling. Obviously, the devil is in the execution, uh, and how it will pan out. We'll see very soon. But when we look at the current situation, and specifically the Gen Z or the new generation, they scroll more, but work less. That's the situation actually. And in fact, if you look at the highlights of the economic survey, which clearly said that 50% of that generation is unemployable, and that's why reskilling and skilling is very important for them. So my question to you, Sanjeevji, is whatever the initiatives that the government has taken now, do you think will fill the gap that the corporate India was seeing, that they have jobs but there is no talent now? How do you think the corporate India will react to this? And more importantly, the internships and all such opportunities, is corporate India ready to empty their pocket?
See, I think there are two parts to it. It's a very good question, and there is something kind of, I would say, hidden behind it. So I think Gurvinder ji said clearly that I think there is one way where the formalization of the economy is happening, which means that job exists. It's just that you have to bring it up to the formal sector and shape, and hence it gets appeared, and then you call it as a new job. I mean, that is something tricky, has been under debate for quite some time. So one is the formalization of economy. When you put incentives, when you put certain initiatives, of course, everybody wants to take it. I mean, it has been done in the past where, even in income tax, there was 80JJAA. There was a scheme on the PF contribution even before. So, of course, everybody wants to utilize that incentive and wants to bring, people who are not in the formal
I think we have lost Sanjeevji. Maybe we can wait for him till he comes, but I will move ahead with Gurvinderji. Gurvinderji, the economic survey had mentioned specifically the rise of the electronic segment. Specifically, we are trade surplus in that domain. Do you think that the budget kind of things, will help manufacturing companies in a far more better way than we could have thought about earlier?
Yeah. So actually, if you see the India's fiscal program, so both central and state governments these days are giving a lot of incentives in the electronic sector and more, in the power semiconductor sector. Okay. So, and this is not only the central government is doing, but the state government is also giving a lot of fiscal incentives, state incentives. Okay, and we at Mitsubishi Electric is also one of them. Okay, so now and they are going and there's a very flexibility also in giving incentives. It's not only and it's a package. It's sort of package. So now with this kind of both side, the central government has introduced PLI scheme for both in the electronic sector, in the air conditioning stuff, in the semiconductor, in the white goods. So that is and more particularly in the component. It's not only in the assembly; it is basically component manufacturing. Okay, and state government also, like now, I would say each state is competing with each other to bring investment in their state. So with both state and center, uh, giving incentives, I think a lot of multinational companies are already coming up for doing a lot of investments in India. And secondly, in this budget also, the honorable minister also talked about FDI. Like they will also they will also look at revisiting some of the regulations in the FDI also. And secondly, they are also moving angel tax, which will be very good for bringing non-resident investment through FDI in this domain. I think all these measures will definitely enhance the investment in the industry sector. Thank you.
Okay, sure, Gurvinderji. Sanjeevji, good to see you back. Do you want to continue?
Yeah. Sorry, I think somebody calls and that it goes into hang. So
Sure.
basically, I was talking about one is that bringing the informal set of employees or the employed people to the formal shape of it by offering a lot of incentives. Of course, it will boost that because everybody would like to utilize those incentives, right? That's one part of it. I think the second part of it is, yes, if you really look at one of the biggest problem we have, it was also discussed in the International Labour Organization report recently, that unemployment rate we have is is in the range of about 5% plus, and there is and this we are also kind of in a situation where we have youth but we don't have skills, and there is a gap between what is expected and what is available. And in fact, in economic survey, one of the statement made is that AI could have a impact on the employment. It's a very debatable statement, but it has been acknowledged also that it may have also some impact on the employment. But overall, I think there is a lot of effort. I think this budget, I must say, everything possible, whether it is about skilling, giving loans, for higher education, upgrading ITIs, giving schemes to the corporates. I think they are really committed. And internship, like you rightly said, there is already an apprenticeship system there, but I think they really want to now go after this and make sure that we kind of create and show this employment creativity And yes, skilling is very important. I think there is a huge gap of skilled individuals and employable youth versus what is required in the industry. So,
Okay.
really good efforts. I think there is a lot of money which is also going to go out of this in the budget. The outlay they have put for all these things. Even women, they have mentioned women in workforce, where they're going to set up women working hostel. I think it's. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of thought which has gone behind it, and I think this is the first time I am seeing in last so many years that there is so much focus on this particular piece of employment and skilling and stuff like that. I'm sure we will see the green shoots of it as the time comes, and everybody will come together, because this is like everybody says that if you want to grow, you need people, you need investment, right? So we are talking about capex. You may get capex, you may grow, but if you don't get the skilled people, how would you sustain it, right? So I think it both goes hand in hand, and I think
Hmm.
government has really recognized that fact. So I think
Right.
it looks like that it's going to be really helpful, and there will be many more suggestions, as when government turns really positive about
Okay.
certain things, then there will be even many more suggestions, initiatives, and it's just the start, I guess.
Right. So, thank you, Sanjeevji. Yuvika, let me come back to you and learn more from you in terms of the economy and maybe the strategy that India should have. A country like India, where we seek large FDI, FII investments because we are in a growing phase. In fact, this economic survey had mentioned that India should look at FDI from China very specifically and aggressively, because that is one way, for India to grow and maybe partner with China. Uh, Obviously, angel tax has been abolished, and there is a corporate tax specifically for the foreigners, which has been reduced. But do you think that the government have done enough specifically to attract foreign investments in India, considering we are in a developing phase and we need foreign investments? Do you think we have done enough, or perhaps we could have done much better? Yuvika, please unmute.
Right. So I think it somewhat has become a more acceptable narrative that India does need support of FDI and FPI, not just from balancing its balance of payments account, but also as a developing country, we need these funds, which can effectively go into technology or joint ventures, pushing forward our manufacturing prowess, and so on and so forth. So I think last year was a year when we did see a lot of equity flows come in, and this was largely hot money, which was largely in the run up to the inclusion of India's bonds in the global bond indices. But we did not fare as well as far as the FDI is concerned. Now, budget did talk about how they want to, bring in more foreign investor interest. How India still happens to be one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It does make sense for the world to look at India, invest in India. We are a fast growing economy, which is largely inward looking. So our consumption is 60% of our GDP. In the budget, we did see specific measures, as you said, the abolition of the angel tax and reduction of corporate tax for foreign companies. But there was no specific discussion as far as a particular FDI for a sector liberalization or something like that is concerned. But I think if you look at FDI over the last decade of this government's, ruling, we do see that incrementally they have moved forward as far as ease of doing business is concerned in India, opening up some of the sectors to FDI. Defense being a classic one, where they have allowed FDI also to come in up to certain restrictions. So their strategy towards FDI has definitely changed, where India was very close to getting FDI in some of the sectors. They have become more open, and the ease of doing business is something where we have achieved considerably, in terms of progress. And I think that is what foreign investors ultimately look for, because there's a notion in foreign investors' mind that India is a tough economy to work with, and that is, I think, something that the government needs to break. So the kind of incentives that foreign investors should be getting, opening up the economy, we have already done that on the bond market side, allowing more FDI to come in other sectors, upping the limit. These are some of the measures that the government can still deploy, but I think it will be over a period of time. FDI is something which takes time to cultivate in a sector. It takes time for foreign investors also to build a decision, get in that, find the right partners or the right local states to invest in, or sectors to invest in. I think that is something that fructifies over a medium to long term horizon. So I think that is where I would see that the focus remains on FDI, but probably not to be looked standalone from this budget, but see what the government has been doing and has been taking steps on as far as the FDI regime is concerned over the last several years.
Sure. Noted your points, Yuvika, quite meaningful. Robin, sir, let me specifically ask in terms of corporate India always asks about the ease of doing business, the compliance kind of issues. The government has tried to address, at least in last couple of budgets, the finance minister has consistently talking about how to reduce, how to reduce, maintain the transparency and reduce the compliance burden on the corporates. In fact, in today's budget, spoke about the transparency and specifically reducing the compliance. They in fact increase the brackets specifically for the search and survey operations of income tax departments, right? If the income tax department is going to do a search, it should be sizable. So my question to you, sir, is, do you think that to large extent now the government has addressed the compliance issues of the corporates, the ease of doing windows and the clearance issues of the corporates, and perhaps they will go far more aggressively in terms of their expansions and maybe the growth?
The answer is no. Short answer to a long question. Ease of doing business is the only route by which we can enhance inward FDI. In this budget, they have talked about that they are going to look at FDIs, and they have also talked about essentially outward FDI in Indian rupees. But that's okay. That's money flowing outside. But we are talking about inward moving money. Ease of doing business is a massive issue. It is just not just some legislation, some search and seizure legislations. Ease of doing business boils down to, if an entrepreneur wants to put up a factory, let's say an international entrepreneur wants to put up a factory anywhere in the world, we are competing with whom? The Vietnam, the Indonesia, the Brazil, the Mexico of the world. So why should they go there and why should they come to India? India has a large captive population, and that 1.4 billion, that's a great advantage for an inward FDI person or a company to look at. But the point here is that because we are competing with other countries, including Singapore, we always have to understand how much time does it take to get a permission to put up a factory. And it was a very good thing we all got to see it this time, that the finance ministers talked about the factor of production: land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. This is the typical 4 factors of production. Now, if you have to put up a factory or an investment, I need land. Land is not available in India, and not easily. It takes years to get a land. Labor, there is very little flexibility of labor. Can we hire and fire labor? The answer is no. Hire, of course, but we can't fire people. So therefore, we get stuck, and people think, oh my God, can I hire 500 people, 100 people, 1,000 people? Maybe not. Capital, yes, that's getting sorted out for sure. That's definitely getting sorted out. There is no capital. And entrepreneurship, there is enough of it. There is one single, apart among the various issues, the government has to focus on one single issue, which is single window clearance. If any entrepreneur wants to put up an entrepreneurial output, a factory or whatever, they have to get permission from one window. They will go to that window, 5 permission, 4 permission, 7 permission, they must get it. This is what happens in Singapore. This is what happens in Vietnam. This is what happens in Indonesia. That is why the world is going there. We need to do that. And EODB wasn't even talked in the budget speech. Yes, FDI was, but not EODB. EODB is a single most important issue which needs to be sorted if we really want to become the Viksit Bharat.
Noted your points, very relevant one. Gurvinderji, my important question to you is now specifically government has offered PLI schemes to a lot of sectors, including yours. And we have seen a great uptake specifically in the electronic manufacturing, specifically for the mobile phones. They have reduced BCD, basic custom duty, to 15% also on mobile phones. How do you see the translation of such initiatives in your sector now?
Okay, so actually both central and state governments are now doing a lot on the by giving incentives in terms of PLI and in terms of state incentives. Now, what I've seen that, and more particularly in my industry, like which is electronics industry, we are into air conditioning manufacturing. Now, various states have now bringing a very simple scheme to offer to the for boosting the investment. For example, if we talk about Tamil Nadu, now this state incentives differ from each state to state. So now, if we talk about Tamil Nadu government, so what they've done is they've brought a very simple scheme that if you invest X amount of money, you will get uh, a capital incentive to Y percentage, which is very simple and very easy to understand, and it's very easy to implement also. And same thing for PLI also. The government PLI scheme for various sectors is very easy and very easy to understand. That if you do this much of turnover, you will get such percent of incentives. But we have to meet a certain criteria of investment and employment. So state government, apart from offering capital incentive, they're also offering employment incentives also. Like for example, and it differs from state to state. So some states are offering that if you employ such number of people, you will get X amount of incentives for so many years. So the simplicity and easy implementation scheme is very essential for a foreign organization, for multinational organization to understand and to implement for easy implementation. And this gives a great motivation to invest. I think so. Earlier, what we used to see some years back, the government used to offer GST based incentive. So those were very complicated and not easy to implement also. And there was also a lot of litigation was also there. A lot of litigation was also there in terms of implementation, in terms of execution also. But over the years, these both PLI and state incentives have become very easy and for implementation and understanding. I think this is give a great boost for inviting investments. Thank you.
Sure. Friends, I think I'm almost done, but let me just take 2 more minutes from you, few seconds to each one of you. Treat this as a rapid fire question. We have heard a lot good things about this budget, and I think they are maintaining continuity as well. But if you allow me to ask you one question, what did you miss in this budget? What you wanted to hear, perhaps, which you didn't say in the finance minister's speech? Yuvika, starting from you. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. So I was saying not so much in the budget speech, because there's only a limit to how much ground you can cover in a span of 90 or 100 odd minutes. But I think when we were looking at the fine print of the budget numbers, I think somewhere where the government has been slightly more conservative in our view and vis-a-vis our own estimates was on the growth front. So if you look at the nominal GDP growth target that the government has worked with, it's remained unchanged at 10.5%, which was the same as the interim budget estimates. Now, this is surprising because if you look at most of the street estimates on growth for this year, most of them are pegging growth estimate at around 7%. And IMF also recently upped its India forecast to 7%, and RBI is probably at the top end of the spectrum at 7.2. So if they are still at 10.5, I think they are being somewhat conservative. But probably, it's better being conservative than being over optimistic and then kind of, having a difficult situation later in the year. So maybe I think growth could have been seen a slightly upward revision, but I think it's something that we can live with. probably they would like to err on the side of caution rather than be over optimistic about it.
Sorry, Robin ji.
In terms of what I would have loved to see, I would have loved to see two quick steps. One, contrary to the popular belief, education. While skilling is mentioned, education is not. Unless we are well educated, skilling doesn't take place. Education in 23-24 original budget, the government was supposed to spend 1,16,000 crores. In 23-24, the government couldn't spend that money, in spite of the fact that education is not good. We, instead of 1,16,000 crores, we only spent 1,09,000 crores. And in the revised budget of 24-25, the government has now planned to spend 1,25,000 crores, which is not enough increase of what the education budget should be. So one is education. But the more profound thing is health. Unless we are healthy, nothing works. In the last year, 23-24 budget original estimate, the government said they are going to spend 89,000 crores. We are not well educated. Our health is not good, and the government did not spend that money. The last year, the government spent 79,000 crores, 10,000 crores short than what they originally thought. And the worst is the next year, which is 24-25, the government has gone back to the original figure of 89,000 crores to be spent. That is a big setback to me. Education and health should have been looked after much better than what it seems. Thank you.
Sure. Sanjeev, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you go ahead?
Sure. So I think I would say two things. One, I think there is a lot more focus is required on ease of doing business. I think you can have multiple plans and aggressive plans and incentives and stuff like that. But as Robin ji rightly mentioned, I think ease of doing is something should also be taken at a war footing, because I think that's where end of the day, having all resources and all components available in our country, that's one element which kind of sometimes pushes us back, right? And I think the second one I feel is see, somewhat I feel is that this budget could have been more uh, uniform across, bringing states together. Uh, but somewhere I see some states being favored. That element is somewhere returning back. So it of course is, it's a very fine line, but people are watching it very carefully.
Absolutely. Gurvinder ji?
Yeah. So I'd like to mention two aspects to it. One, the multinational companies would like to see tax certainty as one thing, and secondly, something to reduce tax litigation. So I couldn't find anything on the tax, on how to reduce the tax litigation. So in terms of speedifying the tax resolutions, tax assessments, and all those stuff. So multinational companies are very, very afraid of tax regime, tax litigations in India. That is one. And secondly, on the capital gain side, what they have done, they have removed indexation in calculating long-term capital gain on land, on sale of land and buildings, like thing. So I think even though the government of India in this budget has reduced the long-term capital gain from 20% to 12.5% for land and building, but by removing indexation, actually, in my sense, in my analysis, they've actually increased the effective tax from 20% to 38%. So, I can give you some short analysis. Like if the land, if I'm having a land which is about 2-3, I bought 2-3 decades earlier, and if I'm selling it today, so probably by removing indexation, So I'll be paying my effective tax rate will go up from actually 20% to 38%. Okay, so I think this is probably it will not be a motivating factor for investment in land or in the real estate, more particularly in the real estate. I think these are the two things which
Okay.
slightly the government could have done better.
Okay, noted your points, Gurvinder ji and Sanjeev ji also. Specifically on those points. Robin ji, thank you. Yuvika, thank you so much for, I think, very relevant and realistic thoughts specifically on the budgets. And thank you so much for helping us understand a different perspective on the budget for ETCFO and our readers and viewers. Thank you so much. Wish I could have taken a few more questions, but we have to stop here as the time is up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.